Hi viewers, this is Dr. Shehzad Kareem. In my previous video, I explained the concept of the implicit knowledge of a language, and in this video, I explained the concept of the explicit knowledge of a language. I trust many of you who have learned or taught English in an ESL or EFL context would know that English in many ESL and EFL contexts is taught, particularly at school level, in such a way that first the learners are taught the rules and regulations of the English language, such as about the parts of speech of the English language, about phrases, clauses, sentences, and many other aspects about the correct use of the English language. And then learners are given practice of the use of the English language. So in such way, when the learners are taught about the rules and regulations of the language, and learners are expected to consciously learn the rules and regulations of the English language. Rules and regulations mean all aspects of the English language, such as the grammatical aspects of the English language, phonological aspects of the English language, graphological aspects of the English language. So when learners are taught about the rules of all these aspects, this is called explicit learning. And this process develops explicit knowledge of the English language of the learners. So if we define the explicit knowledge, we can say that when the learners are consciously aware of the rules and regulations of a language, that is the target language. In this case, I am talking about the English language. So this is called the explicit knowledge of the language. Further, we can define explicit knowledge as that explicit knowledge consists of the analyzed knowledge of the language and the learner's ability to verbalize that knowledge. So if I explain the nature of the explicit knowledge, I would say that basically in this definition I have given two aspects of the explicit knowledge, that is analyzed knowledge and the ability to verbalize that knowledge. So basically explicit knowledge consists of these two aspects. Now I explain these two aspects in detail with the help of examples. Suppose that if I give a sentence to one of my learners and I ask a learner to find out whether this sentence is grammatically correct, and if this is grammatically incorrect, then what is wrong with this sentence. Suppose I give the sentence to the learner that I can too speak English very well, and I ask my learner that if this sentence is grammatically correct. So the learner says that no, this is not grammatically correct, rather it is an incorrect sentence. And I ask my learner to correct this sentence, and the learner says that the use of to between can and speak is wrong. That is, I can too speak English. This is wrong, and I can speak English is correct. So if the learner explains this rule, it means that the learner has got the analyzed knowledge of the English language, which is a part of the explicit knowledge of the English language. That is, the learner is able to correct the sentence by consciously telling that the use of to between can and speak is wrong, and I can speak English very well is correct. So it means that the learner has got the explicit knowledge of the English language, and learner has got one aspect of the knowledge of the explicit knowledge, that is analyzed knowledge. Further, if the learner explains this by telling you can say the technical terms of the English language, explains, and the learner explains that can, that is a modal verb, and other modal verb just like can, could, may, might, must. The use of infinitive after modal verbs is wrong, and after modal verbs we are required to use the base form of the verb. You know that infinitive is to plus the base form of the verb, just like to speak, to walk, to eat. So such expressions are called infinitive, and the base form of the verb mean that is the simple present form of the verb. So if the learner explains that after modal verbs such as can, could, may, might, must, we should use the base form of the verb, not the infinitive form of the verb. So it means that the learner has got the knowledge of the English language, explicit knowledge of the English language, and the learner is also able to verbalize, that is to explain the rule of English language by using the technical terminology that the learner is explaining, that is after modal verbs can, could, may, might, we are supposed to use the base form of the verb, not the infinitive form of the verb. So in this way, the learner has got the ability to verbalize, to explain the rule by using the technical terminology. So this is called the metalinguistic knowledge of the English language. So the explicit knowledge consists of two aspects, that is analyzed knowledge and metalinguistic knowledge. So when the learner has got both aspects of the knowledge of the English language, we can say that the learner has got the explicit knowledge of the English language. However, here I would further say that, as in my previous video I explained, that explicit knowledge promotes the grammatical competence and implicit knowledge promotes communicative competence, and developing only grammatical competence doesn't ensure communicative competence. Similarly, just developing only explicit knowledge of a language doesn't ensure implicit knowledge. And you know really well that implicit knowledge means that a learner's ability to use language to perform various functions in various social situations. So simply explicit knowledge is not enough to enable a learner to use the English language or to use any target language. That's why it is said, and the research and literature says, that explicit knowledge only is not enough to develop communicative competence of the second language learners, and to develop learners' communicative competence along with explicit knowledge, the teaching and the learning of implicit knowledge is also very important. So that's why as I explained in my previous video, that the traditional teaching method, just like a grammar translation method and audiolingual method and other method just like direct method, they are now considered inappropriate because they promote only the explicit knowledge of the language, not the implicit knowledge of the language. And that's why the focus of English language teaching and the teaching of any other target language in modern times is based upon the modern language teaching approaches, such as communicative language teaching and task-based language teaching, because these approaches to language teaching promote implicit knowledge and communicative competence of the target language. Here I would also add something more, just like I would say that if some of the researchers are really interested in doing some more research work in the field of implicit and explicit knowledge, they should also know that along with implicit and explicit knowledge, there is another dimension of both these aspects, which is known as the interface position. And different researchers have presented different positions, interface positions, just like the three interface positions are a non-interface position, strong interface position, and weak interface position. Strong interface position, first I explain strong interface position. According to strong interface position, implicit knowledge can be transformed into explicit knowledge, and explicit knowledge can be converted into implicit knowledge. So some of the applied linguists or researchers, they are of the opinion that there is a possibility of transforming explicit knowledge into implicit and implicit into explicit. This is called strong interface position. The other interface position is called a non-interface position, which says that there is no possibility of transferring explicit knowledge into implicit and implicit into explicit. And researchers such as Stephen Krashen and up to certain extent Basturkmen, they are of the opinion that there is no or very little possibility of transferring implicit knowledge into explicit and explicit knowledge into implicit. Similarly, some other researchers are of the opinion that there is some possibility of transferring implicit into explicit and explicit into implicit knowledge, and they say this as a weak interface position. So if some of the researchers want to do more research in the field of implicit and explicit knowledge, so it is very important that they should know about these three interface positions. Similarly, there is also a need to read a number of research papers and books which have been written about the nature of implicit and explicit knowledge and the nature of implicit and explicit learning. Here I would particularly highlight the work of a group of researchers and professors who have previously worked in the Department of Applied Language Studies and Linguistics and who are still working in the Department of Applied Language Studies and Linguistics of the University of Auckland. I would particularly name Professor Ellis, Dr. Rosemary Erlam, Dr. Jenefer Philp, Dr. Helen Basturkmen, and Dr. Shawn Loewen. who have not only published a number of research papers explaining various aspects of the implicit and explicit knowledge, but they have also written a book, compiled a book, and they have written various chapters in that book about the nature of implicit and explicit knowledge. Similarly, in their research work, they have also done a great deal of work about the methods of measuring implicit and explicit knowledge, such as they have worked on different methods or tests to measure implicit and explicit knowledge, just like elicited oral imitation test, which is a test used to measure implicit knowledge of a language, and there are two other tests which are used to measure explicit knowledge of a language. That is, the names of those two tests are untimed grammaticality judgment test and metalinguistic knowledge test. So these are the tests which have been developed to measure implicit and explicit knowledge respectively, and the research work of these researchers and applied linguists have shown that these tests are appropriate to measure implicit and explicit knowledge of the learners. So I would recommend that you should definitely read the work of these researchers if you are really interested to do research work, and if you are really interested to know more about the nature of implicit and explicit knowledge. So in this video, I explained the concept of the explicit knowledge of a language, and in my future videos, I will explain some other aspects of applied linguistics. Thank you very much